This is why I hate the Georgia Bulldogs.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched podcast around Ole Miss. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we talk about why I hate the Georgia Bulldogs and how I see the Ole Miss versus Georgia matchup unfolding this fall, even with some roster work that's still left to be done. We'll dive into the importance of this game for the Ole Miss Rebels and explain why the Rebels are going to get Georgia's absolute best when they line up in Sanford Stadium this fall. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Clint Shamblin at Locked On Bulldogs. They offer great perspectives on college football, the SEC, and all things Ole Miss. So it's hard for me to do. This is why I hate the Georgia Bulldogs, because full disclosure, growing up, I enjoyed going to the Ole Miss Georgia game. And it was back in my childhood, Ole Miss played Georgia every single year. It wasn't a rarity that Ole Miss played the Georgia Bulldogs. So you got to see their fans. You got to interact with them. You got to see how it went on. And Georgia and Ole Miss's fan base kind of shaded really the same direction whenever they played. It almost was like two sides of the same coin coming in and playing a football game. I loved the Georgia band, the Red Coat band. The Ole Miss stuff, the red and the blue and the red and the black and all of that on stage. But recently, it's changed. It's all changed. And I've actually found ways that I could really hate the Georgia Bulldogs. And one of the ways I want to hate on them right now is their speeding culture, their driving culture around their campus. They get tickets, they arrest. Somebody was street racing the other day, crashed into an apartment complex. Georgia has a culture program in their program right now. They remind me a lot of the Miami Hurricanes of the early 90s, the Dennis Erickson era of the Miami Hurricanes. They're out of hand. They're out of control. And there seemingly is nothing that you can do to stop it. Yeah, Kirby Smart's suspending players now and then. And Kirby Smart's doing whatever he can. But as Steve Spurrier said when he was the coach of South Carolina and was asked about, does he want to play Georgia early in the season? And Steve Spurrier's like, hey, it's pretty good to play him early in the season. They always have a starter or two suspended. This is not a new thing. But Georgia, until they get this culture surrounding the football program, their starting quarterback from 2024 had a freaking Lamborghini before he transferred to Miami. But when you look at what this means and everything around Georgia, it's a problem for them. And now that they are seemingly in a decline, not a big one, but this is not the Georgia Bulldogs football team of 2028 or 2018 to 2022 when they were winning national titles. This is not that team. The team that just ran TC off the field, this is not that team. The Stetson Bennett's not walking through that door. DeAndre Swift is not walking through that door. What you have at Georgia in 2024 is a team that is replacing a quarterback that was very average at Georgia, does not seemingly have a running back that they've normally done. There's not a Todd Gurley or a Nick Chubb or a DeAndre Swift walking through that door at the moment. Wide receiver was a year ago was a train wreck to the point where Kurt Herbstreit described them, or one of them, as a receiver that wasn't a natural catcher of the ball, which that blew my mind. And the defense isn't quite what it was. Now, Georgia's still good. They're still getting great players. The transfer portal has just depleted them. It's not a situation where Alabama and Georgia, they can no longer basically stockpile 74-star players on their roster. They're going to transfer away. But the media and everybody is going to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs as if this was the 2018 to 22 team. It doesn't make sense. The media narratives around college football is ridiculous. So at the same time, the media is not going to be able to get over their driving problem, which it is a problem. It's a real problem. But they're also going to talk about Georgia like Nakobe Dean and DeAndre Swift and Roquan Smith, and all of those guys are walking through the door. This is not that Georgia team. But they're going to be treated like that team. There is talent, don't get me wrong, just not at the level it was. And they got absolutely humiliated in Oxford, Mississippi. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the next segment. And third of all, we make fun of the Alabama arrogance because Alabama fans are extremely arrogant. And they deserve to be. Since 2008, they've been in the discussion nearly every single year. Even in Kalen DeBoer's first year, they were one game away from making the playoffs, essentially. But Georgia fans have become some of the most arrogant, cocky fans in all of college football. They went from like 4 or 6, where they were pretty good-natured, good fun fans that you like to be around, to 10. And maybe these are the transplant fans that jumped on the bandwagon after Georgia started winning. Maybe those are those fans. But when you run across Georgia fans and they bark at you, they bark at you like a dog. They're the Georgia Bulldogs. We get it. Ruh, 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 ruh. Yeah, we get it. But a 37-year-old barking at a 7-year-old on a sidewalk is not something that you should be proud of, and not something that you should be doing. And if we're going to be honest about it, if we're going to be completely honest about it, barking at children and barking at people on the sidelines and going to the game is not a whole lot different than Aggie yell practice. It's cringeworthy. It's bad. And it is where the Georgia fans and the Ole Miss fans have just veered off in different directions. And Ole Miss fans are like, no, we're good. We're fine. We'll see you a little bit later. Now, this is going to be a tough game, though. This is going to be a very tough game. This is a revenge game for Georgia after getting absolutely humiliated in Oxford last season. And this year will be a lot different when they play in Georgia, in Sanford Stadium. We'll break all that down next. Sanford Stadium, Georgia. You can expect the Bulldogs to come out with their hair on fire. Now, the good news is the schedule kind of sets up in Ole Miss's favor, because the schedule has not set up over the last couple of years in Georgia's favor. Georgia has Florida, Georgia has Texas, Georgia has Alabama, Georgia has Ole Miss on their schedule, and Tennessee. All of those games have to happen. And when you look at that, those 5 games, there's a chance that you could see that Georgia does not make the playoffs. Ole Miss goes in there in November, and the season's basically over for them. They've dropped a game against Texas. They've dropped a game against Alabama, and they have Tennessee up next, which is a major rivalry game, and Ole Miss just kind of comes up and sneaks up and gets them. That is absolutely possible, because I think Ole Miss is between Florida and Tennessee on Georgia's schedule. And if Ole Miss wins that game, it'll be because they deserve to win that game, because they are going to get Georgia's absolute best. And I do not care that Georgia right now does not have a starting quarterback necessarily. It could be Stockton. I think there's another guy that could be could get the job as well. Georgia always has a 5-star assembly line of quarterbacks, but they're not always good quarterbacks. I think Brock Vandegrift of Kentucky fame was a 5-star as well. But Georgia doesn't have the running back. They do not have that bell cow running back that Georgia football is known for ever since Herschel Walker. And if you can't run the football in Mike Bobo's system, you're going to put it all on the quarterback. And when you put it all on the quarterback, he's going to struggle a little bit. Georgia has done a decent job in the wide receiver room in the transfer portal. They picked up Zacharias Branch. They picked up the guy from Texas A&M. Forgot his name, Noah something, on the outside. There's some players that they brought in to help out whichever quarterback wins that job, but they still do not have that bell cow running back. And they legitimately had problems on the offensive line a year ago. If Ole Miss can control the game on the defensive line against Georgia, force one of the young quarterbacks to beat them, I like Ole Miss's chance in that game. I think Lane Kiffin's going to be able to score points. I think you're going to have Austin Simmons that's not going to be freaking out at that point playing against the Georgia Bulldogs. I think Ole Miss has a legitimate shot in this game, but you're going to get Georgia's best effort because they are not used to getting humiliated the way they did. And everybody's going to look at it as like the score was only 28-10. Yeah, anybody that watched that game saw that was a lot more than 28-10. It might have been 28-10 on the scoreboard, but that was kind of a mauling. It was a situation to where Ole Miss stacked Carson Beck like 6 or 7 times. Princely Amami Ellen had an amazing ball game. Jackson Dart came back in the game, had his touchdown to Juice Wells. Ole Miss was able to run the ball a little bit, just enough against Alabama or Georgia is always what you want. And that's going against those systems. Ole Miss was able to do that. Georgia was not able to run the ball. They were not able to really pass the ball, and they were trying desperately to find something that worked. And it lets you kind of know the key to the Sanford Stadium game. It's going to be a line of scrimmage game. Forget the skill players, forget all the 5 stars everywhere. It will be a line of scrimmage game. It will be up on the Georgia defensive line to get pressure and stop the run against Ole Miss. It'll be on the Ole Miss defensive line to get pressure and stop the run against Georgia. It'll be on the Ole Miss offensive line to negate that Georgia defensive line. And Georgia, the same thing. It will be the major battle of this football game. It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. It doesn't matter who is playing running back or who's at wide receiver in the secondary. It does not matter then. Line of scrimmage is going to be the key in this football game. And personally, I am looking forward to it. It's going to be a crazy physical game. My biggest concern is Georgia putting the physical toll on you to where you have to go to Oklahoma the next week and then they get you. It just kind of stacks up and it builds on each other. And that South Carolina game, that's the reason that 3-game stretch, you need a little margin for error. We talked last week about the LSU game and brought that up. And yes, this is why that LSU game is the most important game on the schedule, because you need margin for error over this 3-game set. If you can do that, if you can handle that, you are going to be all right. And we'll talk about how this game is going to be the toughest game on the schedule, and likely the one game that the Rebs are guaranteed to not be favored in. We'll talk about that right after this in our final segment. Final segment on this episode of Locked On Ole Miss. Thanks everybody for joining us. I am in recovery from my surgery right now. It's the reason you haven't seen me. I think we're at this point, about 2 weeks in after my surgery. My goal is to be back after 3. I don't know how I'm going to do. We'll have to see side effects and something like that. But you could be seeing live shows again sooner than you realize. And if there's side effects, it could be a little bit later. So we're getting to the point where we're going to figure that out. Watch every single video on the channel. I would appreciate that very much. Subscribe to all the podcast feeds, audio-wise, comment, all of that stuff. Leave a comment on there as well. And if you want to do a little bit more, you can go down in the subtext link down in the description. Sign up for that. It's $5 per month. You can view it like a tip if you want to. I'm doing that instead of a GoFundMe at the moment. And that way you can, if you feel like contributing more, you can. So this is going to be the toughest game on Ole Miss's schedule. This is going to be the best team that Ole Miss plays. Might not have the best record, but this will be the best team that Ole Miss plays. Most talented all over the field. They're going to try and use their physicality as a weapon. That's what Kirby Smart does. He's a master motivator, which means he's going to have his team absolutely ready to play when Ole Miss comes into Sanford Stadium, because they should be. honestly, even though it's in between Florida and Tennessee. He's going to work that loss as a way to get his team up. Honestly, it's good news for Tennessee because Kirby is going to be able to get his team's attention against the Ole Miss Rebels to the point where they might let down against the Tennessee Volunteers. So we'll see exactly how that looks. Who's going to be the running game for Ole Miss? Who's going to get the tough yards for Ole Miss? How is Austin Simmons going to react in that 90,000 seat environment? If I'm not mistaken, that's the first time that he will see an environment like that. It will be the most hostile environment that he has gone in and potentially the most hostile environment he will go in. Now, if he comes back to Ole Miss next year, he has to go to Tiger Stadium, allegedly, because they'll have to come up with a new schedule since they just flipped it this year. But Georgia, 90,000 people in Sanford Stadium is pretty cool. I went and saw a game there in 2012. That was Hugh Freeze's first year. I hit that up and, got to see Uga and his doghouse and watch the game down on the field. It's an incredibly nice stadium, by the way. A really nice stadium, just the class of the SEC as far as stadium construction. I have not seen A&M. I've not seen Texas. I've not seen Oklahoma. I have not seen South Carolina, and I've not seen the Swamp. Those are the stadiums I have not been to. But Georgia, it was a really nice stadium. Kroger Field is also surprisingly nice. They just don't care about basketball. But it's going to be an increasingly tough game for Ole Miss. It's going to be a big game. And if Ole Miss can pull that off, it's all about margin for error. We talked about that LSU game at the end of September. If Ole Miss can win that LSU game and get past this Georgia game, you only have to win 1 out of 3 out of Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Florida for a 10-2 season if you don't drop one of the other games, which if Ole Miss plays like a favorite and does the things that they need to do, they have the talent to win those games. It will be interesting to see. I'm curious to see who's going to end up winning the job as the Georgia quarterback as well. I saw Gunnar Stockton against Texas and thought that he had a ton of potential. I saw Gunnar Stockton against Notre Dame, and it feels like they Bobo-ified him in that game. In the Texas game, they kind of let him run around and just do what he did. It felt like in the Notre Dame game, in the college football playoff, they kind of worked to put him in a box. It's like, okay, you can do all of this stuff. Now we need you to do all of that stuff, but inside this system, this very rigid system. And that makes me wonder if he's going to win the job and he'll actually be the quarterback when Ole Miss plays Georgia. Running game wise, I'm curious to see if Branson Robinson's back, the running back out of Mississippi that signed with Georgia. I'm curious about that. And I'm curious to see exactly how Ole Miss will match up in that game. Like I said, this is the best team that Ole Miss is going to play over the course of the season. So that game in Sanford Stadium is going to tell Ole Miss fans quite a bit. So we'll see exactly how that goes. So real quick before I get out of here, thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC covers the entire conference around the SEC, the best conference in all of college sports. You can find Locked On SEC wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll talk to you later.